Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, September 17th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman of NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson, our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. All right, Scott. Well, we have several big things. We're not going to talk about a lot of little things this week. This is one of those weeks where we got three big ones. Yeah. First off, the Theranos trial, the Elizabeth Holmes trial. You're there every day.
Yeah, and I must admit, as someone who doesn't cover court much, this is fascinating to watch it all start to unspool. They began with the money person, sort of the finance person from Theranos, laying out that the company brought in a lot of investment money, which we knew, and did not generate any profit, which we also knew. And it was interesting because nobody goes to jail for that, right?
Right. Not in this town.
But apparently my lawyer friends tell me, and I've been checking in with lots of them during this, you've got to lay down the foundation that Theranos brought in a lot of money. There was a lot of optimism around these machines, and ultimately, and they had years, they didn't generate any profit. And again, biotech, that's not all that rare.
Tell that to Amazon.
Exactly. So the last couple of days, we've seen the first whistleblower, Erica Chung, a young lab tech out of Berkeley, who got her first job out of college at Theranos. And she had a collegiate science background. She's very smart.
Wouldn't that be a crazy career and a resume? Your first job.
Well, it's been crazy for her. Now that she's become the whistleblower, she's done TED Talks. She was a star of the Bad Blood book, by Wall Street Journal's John Carreyrou. And now
she's leveraging it. Isn't that part of all this?
At first she was hiding from it because one of the things that Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani did was to literally threaten people. On the stand, Erica Chung told a story of when she went to her next job, post Theranos. There was someone in an SUV waiting in the parking lot. Gentleman gets out of the car and hands her, essentially a cease and desist, don't talk about Theranos letter. She said she was very intimidated, and who wouldn't be?
Right.
And this is the kind of tactic that's written about in the books a lot. So she testified about that, but even more, she testified that when she was in the labs, when she was there in the fairly early days of Theranos, she noticed that the testing just didn't work. And that, according to her, and I almost quote verbatim, you had as much of a chance of flipping a coin as you did to get one of these results right. Some of the machines were wrong 50% of the time.
Wow.
For healthcare, that's pretty frightening.
Yeah.
So the question is, did Elizabeth Holmes know this? And did she continue to lie to investors by saying these machines worked when she knew they didn't? We have to establish that. Now, Erica...
So who was her muscle in there? Companies that send out guys with black vans to talk to people, SUVs, typically have an ex-FBI guy in there or some law enforcement who's the muscle.
They had lots of investors from the government and even from, the military. I don't think that was it. I think they just had A, a lot of money from investors, and B, a very, very aggressive legal team led by David Boies. That's a name that's got to be familiar for you.
Okay.
Microsoft and all that.
Sure.
And he was not only their attorney, but as it comes to find out, a pretty big investor in the company. And I'm not sure how conflicted that is. I honestly don't know if your lawyer can also be an investor and have shares of stock. Perhaps that's how they paid him.
Maybe, but that raises some interesting questions. Was he on the board too?
He might have been on the board. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
now it gets weird.
But that's David Boies, big hitter.
Yeah, sure.
Very well-known lawyer, known for aggressive tactics. And if you believe the reporting in the Wall Street Journal, his tactics were extremely aggressive. And we're going to hear more about that because while Erica Chung had a direct email correspondence with Sunny Balwani, she did not with Elizabeth Holmes. So they need to prove somehow that what she knew got to Elizabeth Holmes. That link, according to her, is Tyler Schultz, another familiar name who was not only the grandson of George Schultz, who was on the board of directors.
Yes, we'll get to him in a minute.
Right, but Tyler Schultz was also a young lab assistant, worked with Erica Chung, and he found out from her about these labs and tests, and apparently, according to the reporting so far, emailed Elizabeth Holmes directly. So I expect him to testify fairly soon as sort of the next step after Erica Chung. So it's getting interesting pretty early on in the trial.
Okay, so who's giving testimony? Who's on the list now? The big names, the heavy hitters.
Well,
Kissinger.
Right, Henry Kissinger.
George Schultz.
Well, he passed away actually.
Well, I know, but his son.
His grandson Tyler
But
Schultz. Yes.
but I want to bring up Schultz for a moment because he seems to be a major connection in here,
Yes, he's
which
very
is
connected.
interesting because I interviewed him for my TV show. In fact, after I read some of this stuff, I realized I may have been at the Marine Memorial at a luncheon there when Elizabeth Holmes was there when she made the connection with George Schultz because I got in the elevator and talked to Schultz because I had interviewed him years ago, and he was like 90 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and he was always the rock of integrity. I mean, that's the guy you look up to and go, in my old age, I want to be George Schultz. That brilliant career and all that, and those luncheons are oftentimes networking moments, and I wonder if she was there when I was there, and that's when she pitched him.
Yeah, maybe so.
But it's really interesting. His name appears, and then all of a sudden, all these generals and admirals start lining up.
Right. I mean,
and I get the feeling he's the connection.
He very well likely was because through him you have all these government and military connections. I mean, Mad Dog Mattis was on the board.
Yes.
Obviously Henry
The
Kissinger.
warrior monk. Yes.
Right, and eventually you get to some of the major investors like Rupert Murdoch and obviously a lot of Sand Hill Road VCs, but also other private investors. And the list is long, and I don't know how many of them will actually make it to the witness stand. But
are they going to bring 98-year-old daughter Henry Kissinger up there?
What theater that would be?
Oh.
Imagine.
Boy, it would just tie all the last 40 years, all the way back to Nixon. Everything comes all together now. Mad Dog Mattis and,
Who knew she could bring
Afghanistan.
together history like this
Yeah.
when she set out to have a blood testing device?
Well, it kind of underscores that argument that everybody famous knows each other and they're all connected.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're going to see some of those connections over the next few weeks.
Okay, so let's talk about your experience doing this, because you sent me a note saying, I'm sitting here covering the Holmes trial, watching the Apple
Oh, yeah.
product introduction at the same time.
Well, on Tuesday...
So you're multitasking reporting right now.
Yeah, on Tuesday they hit at the same time, and I specifically went to the overflow courtroom so that I could lay out a couple of devices and have a little room. And sure enough, that day was not a big day in terms of, public and press and stuff. So I had a little bit of room. And it was also, as it happened, before Erica Chung was called in, there was a lot of sort of procedural items to take care of that they even excused the jury for. And so, I found my mind wandering just a bit to the other screen where Tim Cook was introducing the new iPhone.
My normal job.
Yeah, and so was able to sort of keep an eye on that. And again, that wouldn't have happened if Apple wasn't virtual still. These events are happening over...
You're not having to go up to Moscone Center or whatever.
Well, right now it's at their headquarters in Cupertino, but it's all taped and it's very anticlimactic. And again, it really hits home that what Apple is doing now is sort of incrementally updating the phone, which I think is what they were doing before. But you got to admit, we were all sort of caught up in the spectacle as they were incrementally updating.
Yeah, but there was always that every couple of years that moment where Steve came out. And another thing, and he actually would change the world. I mean, we all got spoiled by the first decade of the 21st century, where Apple and Steve Jobs were literally changing the world every other year, and creating trillion-dollar markets.
True,
and it's never been the same since. We haven't had any moments like that.
No, I mean, I remember the excitement when Cook first came up with the watch.
Yes.
But that excitement quickly became... Well, wait, it's a watch.
Yeah,
what do we need to do with it? And ultimately, years in, as someone who has worn the watch and tested the watch. But even that was
Steve's idea. So.
Apparently so. But, either way, it's been something of a revenue generator. But I wouldn't say that it's changed the world.
No.
It's opened people's eyes to the idea and the potential of wearables.
Right.
But we're not quite... saying, hey, doctor, I don't need to see you because my wearable tells me everything I need to know.
Yeah. I already had a checkup this morning while I was still asleep in bed.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's more about, again, the iPhones. We saw the iPhone 13 and its various iterations. We saw new iPads, including a mini that I think is going to be a hot seller. I think that's going to come back strong.
Yes. I mean, I read some comments. There's some interesting news that came out of it that the new iPhone actually has a faster order rate right now, the 13 than its predecessor, the 12, which is, for an incremental improvement, that's kind of impressive.
It is, because the phones didn't stop selling during the pandemic. So it's not as if people are saying, now I'm feeling like I can throw 1,000 to 1,300 at a phone where I couldn't before,
Yeah.
because they were doing that before, even
Right.
during the pandemic. We bought a lot of electronics.
So what's the appeal that everybody feels like they've got to get the 13?
Well, I don't know. I mean, one analyst told me that her idea was people are not buying every year. I mean, we think they are,
So
but
this
seems to be a big
we have
year.
this sine wave then,
Yeah.
and we're at the peak.
Yeah, and the 12 is a very good phone. Its Samsung counterpart is a very good phone.
Yeah.
Some of the Google Pixels are very good phones. The 13 looks like a very good phone. The camera's improved, the processing improved, the battery life a little bit improved, and that's what people wanted to see
A
more
little
of.
bit improved.
Right.
We talked about this last time.
Right.
That's what people really want.
Right, and they're gonna have to wait a bit.
And a
but
slightly faster processor.
yeah, and it is. I'm amazed as someone who grew up in a world before iPhones,
Yeah.
that you've got a full-on, full-blown computer in your pocket or purse everywhere you go.
Lifestyle. You have all of civilization in your hand.
Yeah.
The death of 20 industries made that iPhone.
Right, and if there is, especially in a place like California where the vaccination rate is high and you're starting to see people back at the malls, if there is an optimistic Christmas shopping season to be had, I think
Yeah.
Apple will benefit from that.
Well, those incredible amount of orders. Tim Beharon, who's been covering Apple for 35 years
Yeah.
now, he really raved about the new iPad. That he thought it was like a perfect solution, the medium-sized one. Do you
Yeah.
agree? Did it impress you? I was real curious after I read Tim what you thought.
I remember when the first iPad mini came out and it was a hot seller, and
Yeah.
now they've improved it and made it fast and everything.
But they detuned the chip. It's got the same chip as the 13,
Right.
but they detuned it. Why would they do that?
I don't know. You're getting into areas that I don't know, but I mean, I must say the 13 Max Pro, it's a big phone, right?
Yeah.
And the iPad mini is a small iPad.
Yeah.
And they're not all that dissimilar in size and in what they can do. And
Right.
remember when Apple had a bit
Well,
of
you
an
get a stylus with the
Well,
iPad.
yeah, if you still but which I believe Jobs said he would never have, right?
Right.
But it reminds me a bit of when the iPods
Yeah.
were getting bigger and had photos and could do all these things, and then the phones came out, and there was so much overlap, and eventually they said, okay, just do it all on your phone.
We're back to incremental improvements. Yeah.
And so as people, I like to think that people are still reading
Yeah.
books.
No
and
5G
downloading.
on the iPad too.
No, I know.
It's like
Do you want to make phone calls on them, or
It's
I
like
don't know.
it's like. Remember they used to take the Dodge would do that. So the Viper, had a certain type of engine, and you'd have to find the same kind of engine and something else, but they detune it down. It's like they're intentionally making the iPad less because they're afraid it's going to cannibalize the phone.
Right, and I don't quite understand. It seems like it would be used for different things.
Yeah.
But again, they're similar sizes. There's, I think people have realized there's a lot more you can do with the iPads that
Yeah.
make them like computers. And I wouldn't expect the iPad to cannibalize the iPhone. I would expect it to cannibalize the laptops.
But isn't that how you're supposed to do it? You come up with a better product that cannibalizes an older design?
Yeah, no, and I think that's what Apple is doing. Remember, this is a company that is doing pretty well in the marketplace.
Oh, yes, indeed.
And I think their bet on the iPad as not being a computer killer,
Yeah.
but as being a good alternative for those who are on the go.
A distinct market.
Yeah, I mean, if I flew a lot, that's
yeah.
the device I'd really want.
And just take along a keypad in your
Exactly.
luggage.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So the third big story of the week, man, the Wall Street Journal is en fuego right now. I mean, I look at this and I'm so full of envy as a former investigative reporter. I wish I was on this story. They are taking Facebook apart. And, you wonder, you break the news of an upcoming product as a reporter, and now the police come to your door, and lawsuits and everything else. But you can still break internal memos of companies.
Sure.
And you got to wonder, how did the journal get this? Now, it happens two ways. One of them, he has a contact with a contact with a contact that wants to talk to you and show you some stuff because they're really upset. And then you got to really discover, why are they upset? Do they have an axe to grind? Because everybody has an axe to grind. You're not going to risk giving away corporate documents to a newspaper unless you're really pissed off. So why are you pissed off? That's the first thing you got to do. But the second one is sometimes I watched this happen with Pete Carey at the Merc. I mean, he had 2 Pulitzer Prizes. I worked with him for a while. He would get to the office, the newsroom at the Merc, and go over to his mail cubby hole, and there'd be an envelope in there. And the guard didn't know how it got there. Somehow it got into the newsroom of the Mercury, and it was sitting there, and he would open it up, and it'd be internal documents from, the FBI or the CIA. Somebody wanted to take somebody else down, and they couldn't get to him, so they gave it to you. Well, we're on the fourth, today is the fourth part of this ongoing story, the Facebook files. They even got their own logo for the series. That means that it's big for the paper. So far, what have they broken? We'll get into days in a moment, but they've broken the fact that internal documents, people inside of Facebook basically agreed this was screwing up teenage girls.
Yeah, of the four things that they've broken, and we've talked about how they've given some people more leniency on the platform, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
This is the thing that's the most damning to me, and yet it's the thing that's not necessarily the most surprising. But it's that Facebook knew Instagram was toxic to especially teen girls. And
well, as a father of 2 teen girls, this must have hit home.
it hit home, but it wasn't a huge surprise. But for the fact that Facebook had been discussing this and not doing anything about it, really, and that's what surprises me. And then to see the response from the head of Instagram, who compared it to cars, and by that I mean he said, well,
there's
cars
more good than bad.
Right, cars sometimes kill people, but they get us to where
tell
we're going.
that to the parents of a teenage girl who committed suicide because she got fat shamed or something on Facebook.
Right, and he's saying social media is more good than bad, and that's been a common theme, well, pretty much since 2016, but especially after January 6th, is social media more good than bad or more bad than good? And to have it broken down and drilled down, and good for the journal for doing this, to teen girls who are not only the target market for Instagram, but really the most affected by social media.
Right.
And to find out that they knew, they're making body issues worse for teen girls.
Yeah, well, this survey that says there are a number of girls who have considered suicide because of what happened to them on Facebook or Instagram.
Right.
I mean, what the hell?
Well, okay, but those girls in a previous generation, maybe 15, 20 years ago, if they would consider it, it would be because of what happened to them in the hallways of school.
Yeah, it'd be the Mean Girls situation.
Right,
yeah.
or even earlier on the playground or something. And now, because social media is what it is and it's so pervasive, it doesn't have to be face to face. You can smile at somebody face to face and then cut them down.
Yeah, but the
online.
Mean Girl syndrome, it's 4 girls giving you a hard time.
Right.
Instagram, it's 5,000 other girls giving you a bad time. All of a sudden, you feel like not just I don't want to go to school today because I hate to run into these girls. Now it's like I think everybody in the world hates me, and that's a whole new level of self-destruction.
Right, and when you look at companies, typically you say, hey, look at this, and they say, oh, okay, we'll look into it. Come to find out, Facebook knew this and had been discussing it, and now we know what the head of Instagram felt. Well, but all in all, it's a plus.
You got to break a few eggs.
Exactly, and I think that's going to have legs for a while because.
Do you see? I see lawsuits coming from this.
Well, but does Section 230 protect an Instagram from those sort of lawsuits? Remember, we were thinking lawsuits after January 6th, and because of all the COVID misinformation, I don't think we've seen any, right?
No.
So is this what brings them up? I don't know.
Attorneys all over America are thinking, what a case this would be. Look what's going on today with that girl and her boyfriend. The one that had the fight with her boyfriend, they can't find her.
Oh, yeah.
And the entire country is galvanized right now because pretty blonde teenage girl, and she's missing, okay? Picture a trial where they're holding the picture of this sweet 14-year-old girl, the defense attorney, saying Facebook knew they were doing this. We have a quote, this is toxic. Teenage girls, that's an internal memo. That's a smoking gun.
Right, think about it, Michael. We've gotten to the point where we know government isn't going to do much. Heck, they're still asking how Facebook makes money.
Right.
But maybe there is, and we know we have a young, hip FTC chair, maybe there is a legal mind out there that's going to crack this ice open
Yeah.
and open the floodgates on something like this because of what you said, because of something like this, and the politics, the misinformation, and now the body image issues all might come to the forefront.
Oh, and Facebook, as usual, seems to be oblivious. Remember we were talking about a year ago about how Facebook was doubling, it seemed like they were doubling down on bad publicity. So what are they now announcing now? New Facebook programs for young people, younger than teenagers. Why would you announce that at the same time unless you are so absolutely convinced you're invulnerable to any sort of outside pressure?
Right, because so far they have been. No one has cracked that ice.
Yes.
And Facebook, which has, trust me, a whole lot of PR people, just still can't get out of its own way.
Yeah, well, and today, the Wall Street Journal, Facebook staff flags criminals, but company often fails to act. And apparently we have drug cartels recruiting people, human trafficking in the Middle East, using the site to have lure women into abusive employment situations. Armed groups in Ethiopia using the site to incite violence against ethnic groups.
Well, let me bring this back to what we started to talk about, the Theranos trial and Elizabeth
Right.
Holmes. A lot of people are saying this is really interesting, not just because of the specific facts of the case, but because a CEO who maybe knowingly led investors and the public astray is actually being called to the carpet for it. That's very rare, as you know.
Indeed.
And so a lot of people are looking at the Elizabeth Holmes trial as sort of Silicon Valley on trial.
Mm-hmm.
Are things going to change for companies that knowingly mislead investors, users, you name it? And at this point, I believe we know that Facebook has done just that.
Mm-hmm.
So if Elizabeth Holmes loses, are other companies going to be watching and saying, uh-oh, we've been doing that and getting away with it because we're, I don't know, too big to fail, because there's not much in the way of standards, and all of a sudden that may close in on them.
Well, let me make a prediction, because I think this is the best business investigative story of the year, maybe of the last several years. Wall Street Journal gets a Pulitzer Prize. And if they don't get it, at minimum, they get a Loeb Prize, because this is great stuff. And it's traditional, real reporting. It's gumshoe reporting. They're doing the work. And I don't see any bias in this story whatsoever. This is traditional, straight, objective journalism. And, bless them.
And it affects a lot of people.
And affects a lot of people. And it will probably cause major changes, cultural changes.
That's what we need to see. We haven't seen those yet at Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah. Okay, well, before we run out of time, let's see. Stocks are weird. They don't quite seem to know what's going on.
End of sentence. Good.
Stocks
are weird.
They're getting good economic data right now. Everything looks good. Jobless claims rose, which is a good sign, etc. But the market they still don't know. They can't predict the future. And when the market can't convict the future, they look like just a bunch of cats wandering around. I mean, the market's not doing a lot of moving right now. Let's see, a YouTube duo. Did you read this? They found $100,000 worth of vintage games in a hoarder's house.
You mean video games?
Video games, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like really rare ones. And the place was disgusting. Literally, they had to dig. A lot of the stuff was still in its wrappers. Okay, and and it was covered with cockroaches and maggots, and they got so excited they didn't want to leave, so they were pulling up these games from underneath these disgusting, massive, swirling, insects and stuff. Estimate $100,000 worth of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
It reminds me when that
E.T.
video game for Atari bombed and they buried it out in the desert.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, they dug a giant pit.
Right.
I covered that one. And finally, I literally got this off the paper. The father of Carvana's. This is a tech story. Carvana.
Sure.
Your automat car company.
Right.
The CEO's dad just sold $3.6 billion of stock. A used car guy.
Wow.
And he got 3 points. And I thought, well, happy Father's Day. That's a pretty nice deal.
That's when your kid does well.
Yeah. That's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.